everybody. Welcome and thank you once again for joining us for Tech Safe here in Worcester, Massachusetts. We'll be taping episode 44 today. So we are so very grateful to our hosts here in the studio and our producer, Adam. And today I want to start with a little bit of a demonstration. So what I have here is a radio frequency radiation detection meter. This is the Safe and Sound Pro 2 that was recommended at the EMF Medical Conference. And right now, here in the studio, because there's not a heavy load of radio frequency, we're at about 2,000 microwatts per square meter. That's certainly still not a level that we'd want to live in, because the science tells us we should be at 10 microwatts per square meter or less. But I want to show you what happens when I take my cell phone out of airplane mode and the antennas that are mounted in here start hooking up and transferring data and signal. We were at about 2,000 just a moment ago, and I'm going to put this back in airplane mode so I don't radiate myself, but we went from 2,000 to 2,830,000 microwatts per square meter. 2 million. And in the scientific literature, there is no safe level of this man-made radiation. And indoors, they recommend that we be at 10 microwatts per square meter or less. So I have invited somebody who's been working really hard in her life, in her child's life, and in her community to try and create a safe living environment. So today I'm delighted to have with us from Greenfield, Massachusetts, Elana Kirschenbaum. Did I say it right?
Kirschenbaum.
Kirschenbaum. Elana, welcome, and thank you for taking time out of this especially busy week. Why don't we begin by having you tell us how you first learned about man-made radio frequency radiation and the biological impacts that can have.
Sure. I just want to thank you so much for having me on and for all the work that you're doing. And for anyone out there who's listening, who's doing work in their community, I'm so very grateful for you. In 2010, I moved to the Catskills for a position at an animal sanctuary, because one of my many passions is other species and the planet and the health and well-being of all life on the planet. And there was a time I was living on 10 acres in a beautiful cottage, and there was a main house on the property. And I was trying to save a little money because at that time my salary was a little lower. It was just I wanted to work full time and a passion of mine. And I decided I'd always used wired internet. I wasn't in the wireless world. For whatever reason, I just didn't want to go that route. So I always used an Ethernet cable. And I thought, well, let me save some money. And my landlord had wireless at their house, and they said I could use it. And I did that. And I would be working on the computer, and I noticed that I started to get headaches. And I had never been someone who got headaches regularly. And I couldn't figure out what it was. It was a heaviness in my head. It just clearly felt like a headache that just persisted. And I didn't know what was causing it. But what I started to notice after many, many weeks was that when I spent significant time away from the computer, I noticed the headache would dissipate. And when that clicked in my head, I did some experiments, and I spent extended periods away from the computer, and I noticed my headache didn't return. So I made that link, which kind of made me feel grateful that I hadn't been using wireless for all that time. And I reverted back to the wired technology that I had. And I started to dive a little bit into the research on it. I only had a cell phone because my mother put one in my car a few years back because she wanted me to be safe in an emergency. I didn't use it that much, but that was sort of the seed that was kind of planted of my awareness. And over time, my awareness has grown. I mean, I advocated at my workplace where I went to have wired internet and there was all wireless, and they shifted to wired internet for me.
Oh, good for you. That in itself is such an inspiration that if we just calmly bring the facts forward and show what the risks are, we can indeed make inroads. With some
Yeah.
people, not everybody's going to listen, but that in itself is a win. Congratulations.
Yeah. So this was a new employer. I had left the other one where it was wired, but in the new employer, I was getting headaches. And I talked to the founder and at the animal sanctuary, and they made the change, and I was so grateful. But they reverted back to wireless before I left. So these kinds of things, what I have known is that these seeds have to be planted, and education awareness, it takes time for people to really recognize what's happening, because if they're not feeling sick and you can't smell, taste, touch, I mean, there's no, people aren't sensing this. They're not carrying around meters like I do, the Safe and Sound Pro 2 too. I'm always carrying it with me. I could talk a lot more about what was the seed and how it's grown and expanded over time, but that's basically what started me on this path of education and awareness.
Well, good on you for recognizing that something was amiss, and you made the correlation that just like our Centers for Disease Control says for ionizing radiation, which is the sun and the gamma rays and all of that, spend as little amount of time radiating yourself, create as much distance from something that's radiating, and if you can't get away from it, you should really look into working with a professional to shield it. Shielding's tricky. You don't want to do it on your own unless you are an expert. But yeah, you figured out that much time in front of a radiating device was taking you down. And I offer free public education webinars every month at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. So as Elana says, you know, we learn a little bit, we make a few changes. We come back, we learn a little bit more. So folks are welcome to come to our monthly free webinars every single month if you want. We have a lot of folks who come back time and again to just keep learning what's happening in the public policy arena, what's happening in the science, and what's happening in the courts. But what we want to focus on, and you can go to Massachusetts for Safe Technology and go to our events page and register for our free webinars. But what we want to focus on today is the lifestyle choices that Elana has made to take care of herself and her daughter. So you were in touch with me in the recent years to say, I really want to find a community where I can bring my daughter and raise her in a healthy environment. So where were you? What did you investigate, and where did you wind up?
Oh gosh, you know, before I kind of share a little more detail, I just want to say that this is such, I have found that this to be such a hurdle, such a challenge. When we moved back to New York, back to Rhode Island from New York to be near my family, we stayed with them for a little bit. And I did not have a meter with me. I packed it away because I had stuff in storage. And I didn't know until we were about to move out that we were living in a higher level of wireless radiation just from ambient. We had a cover over the wireless router they had in the home, but that was a stressful journey in of itself. It took a while for us to find a place. I wanted to find a single family home, but I was not able to do so. The competition is fierce, and there's very few inventory out there just to rent a home. I wasn't ready to buy yet. We ended up in a brand new townhome community, beautiful townhome community, adjacent walls, which I knew posed a risk because other people most likely will have wireless. And it was incredibly stressful. I had to spend quite a bit of time blocking walls. I consulted with a specialist, and I ended up purchasing a special RF foil that I had. I first had to discover where it was coming from, and thankfully I had one of my best friends here, one of my best non-human friends, but that helped me to discover it. But it took some time, and there were two primary walls that I could mitigate, and it helped tremendously. I wasn't able to mitigate as much, but we were in the green for quite a bit. I also woke up to dirty electricity and other issues, which I won't get into much today because we're focusing on the wireless radiation. But it's been a big learning curve, but very stressful. We had to leave that home because of toxic radon levels that the landlord would not mitigate. We had to move again. And thankfully, we got a front page story on the newspaper about this. And there's legislation that they're trying to pass to protect tenants renting from this, because I offered to pay for the mitigation. We ended up in a home where a single family home, and I thought we'd be safe. But anyway, we ended up having to deal with that, and there was a cell tower in the distance, and I couldn't control that. I couldn't really I blocked it as much as I could in the bedroom, but and now I spent an incredible amount of time, because I'm a mom now, and just trying to find a school that would be a safe environment for my daughter. And I'll tell you, that is a needle in a haystack.
Mm-hmm. I know we've started a pilot project that we are asking 10 champions from around the U.S. and Canada, where we're going to be first educating the families around us what this man-made radio frequency radiation is and what the perils are. And then once we have a good group of, heart-centered, smart, well-intended people, then we'll start these conversations with the schools. And I know you had reached out when you were trying to help bring the school that you'd identified up to speed on this. So quickly, how has that journey gone to get your daughter into a safe learning environment?
Well, in over 2 years, we visited schools in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, even Rhode Island. I mean, I would be making calls to schools and be very dismissed with my concerns. There was no willingness to learn. There was no willingness to investigate. I would send emails with information and helpful links. I'd follow up. There was just such incredible resistance until I contacted a school that is near us, which is why we moved here to the Greenfield area. It's a very small elementary school. It's a very unique elementary school, because I was looking not only for a safe physical environment, but also a learning environment that I wanted for my daughter. And this had it all. And when I had my first conversation with the co-director, he was willing to listen and learn. And he actually attended one of your educational webinars, a recorded one, because he couldn't do the live one. And he was very moved by the information. But long story short, they consulted with their medical consultant, who is a very prominent person in the world. He's a medical ethicist. I don't know why he's their medical consultant, but he dismissed their concerns, and which I think is the primary reason they decided to maintain the one wireless router they had in the building, which is pretty near where the children are for part of the day. However, I was able to negotiate, and they have the long story short, they have a cover on it now. They went with a wired phone, which was wireless. Now it's back to wireless again, because of the troubles they had with it, but there's a very significant cover over that. And they only turn the printer on when they're going to make a copy, which is not that frequently. So there's been mitigation there. I'm very grateful. The staff probably still have their cell phones on, even though I have advocated to have them in airplane mode. But it's sort of like step by step by step. And so it's been a journey, and I am wanting to work to help educate and help people become more aware of this, because so many millions of children are being exposed at levels that are so unhealthy.
Right. So what I was going to recommend, and this moment may have passed for you guys, but Harvard Law School Center for Ethics at the Jaffra Center, they published a free online 59-page report called Captured Agency, How the Federal Communications Commission is Dominated by Those They Presumably Regulate, right? So it's the Fox Watch and the Hen House up there at the FCC. And if that medical doctor is an ethicist, that would be a document that he should probably see to kind of open his eyes that, we've been fed a whole lot of disinformation from industry and our own government. And this is really a true issue, and that children are especially susceptible because, as we know, their brains are thinner, or their brains have a higher water content, their skulls are thinner, And they are inch per inch absorbing more of this man-made radiation into their bodies than you and I. So we definitely have resources if your school administrator is open to sharing that with their medical consultant. And then on our webpage at Massachusetts for Safe Technology for resources, there's an excellent document that anybody can print out and hand to their own doctors. It's the Electromagnetic Fields Medical Conference, and it was chaired by a brain surgeon, and it was co-chaired by Dr. Magda Havas up at, she's a professor emeritus from Trent University, and she's taught electromagnetism for 25 years up there. So top people in our world to help those who've only heard from industry that you have to have heat to have harm, and otherwise it's all good. And as we know, because the science has advanced, we know you don't have to have heat. And that's the levels that our government still allows. And we know that the biological effects are happening at hundreds of thousands of times below what the FCC limits are today. So we, as parents, as citizens, need to be very careful where our sources are and not be afraid to do our own research on this. And anybody is welcome to go out to my research page at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. I'm a technical and professional writer by trade, and I got in way over my head when I started learning about the science. So I just started categorizing it, and I've got links to all those pages from my own research repository that I called Understanding EMFs, because I didn't understand what EMFs were, these electromagnetic man-made fields of radiation. So I try to tee it up in a non-threatening way so that people can come out there and feel safe in their own learning adventures. So Elana, you've gotten into a home, you've gotten into a town, you've gotten into a school, and now I understand that environment that you've worked so hard to try and protect yourself and your loved ones is now under threat. Can you tell us what you're up against right now?
Yeah, sure. I think ultimately even where we're living now, there's smart meters coming. And so I want to get us into, we're renting right now because we had to move very quickly to get into the school for my daughter. So we're hoping to purchase a home. But what I find is that right now with this wireless infrastructure just proliferating everywhere, and the lack of awareness and education still so profound that there are going to be continuous threats to that we have to really address. And right now, there is a cell tower that there has been proposed by a wireless company to be placed right near our home down the street. The only reason I learned about this was because someone I know saw a classified ad in a paper. If I hadn't learned about that, this probably would be approved by now. So we have been, no one has known about this. The city only needs to inform people who live within 300 feet, which is, a very tiny, tiny radius.
It is, and in the scientific literature and the epidemiological studies which tell us what is actually happening in real time out in society, there's this neurotoxicity and death curve that starts to come down at 500 meters from a cell tower. It doesn't actually catch up to regular population statistics till almost double that. So 500 meters is 1,640 feet. And if you double that, we're well over 3,000 feet that nobody ever should be living or spending significant time under a cell tower. So that's what we know scientifically, but most towns' zoning code was heavily influenced by industry. And so you know, at least your town has a setback. It's only 300 feet, but that is certainly not enough to protect anybody. Out in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, Verizon put a cell tower right on top of a neighborhood, and it made 17 children and adults so sick they had to abandon their homes. Their Department of Public Health or their Board of Health they finally, first in the nation, did an investigation and indeed declared that that is uninhabitable. By the second summer of this cell tower being active, all the pollinators were gone. People couldn't even grow everything they had grown in their gardens for decades. So we don't take this lightly. There is no cavalry coming. The courts are dragging their feet. The courts found the FCC guilty for not looking at the science on this, but they didn't give them a deadline. So there's no cavalry coming from up above. We have had bills here in Massachusetts. We helped New Hampshire pass the first law in the country to investigate this issue. And they came out with a groundbreaking report after doing their deep dive for a year that says we should have setbacks in our communities. We should be transitioning away from wireless in our schools. We should be educating the public. We should be getting our federal delegates on board with this and fixing those broken laws that the industry so heavily influenced. So bottom line, no cavalry coming. And thank goodness Elana understands that. And so she and others in Greenfield have been mobilizing their citizens. So tell us how that has come to pass and where you guys are with that journey right now.
Wow, it seems to be a confluence of a few different things that have connected me to a woman who volunteers her time to help people in communities, who's connected to the Environmental Health Trust, and her name is Pam Krupp. She runs Safe Tech Forward, and I thankfully was connected to her, and she is guiding me. We're connected to Kent Chamberlain, who is one of the 13 members on the New Hampshire State Commission. And he has extensive expertise on the impacts of wireless radiation, on cell tower siting. And we have hired an attorney to write a memorandum. We are getting people's signature to be on that. We have 22 people right now. We're working with a lawyer. Our primary concern right now, which is what the hearing was supposed to be about this week, but it's getting postponed till next week, is to have them approve and vote in favor of having Kent Chamberlain present to them. Excellent. It's imperative that they get educated on the community impacts of a cell tower so close to community residents and a school.
You are so fortunate. Dr. Kent Chamberlain, as you said, served on the New Hampshire Commission, and he is now retired, but at the time that he served, he was the chair at the University of New Hampshire of their computer and electrical engineering department. And he had been working in this field developing medical devices and such that use radio frequency radiation. And when he was appointed to that commission, he thought, oh, this will be a slam dunk. Of course, wireless is fine. I mean, we've been working with it for 30 years. Well, once he started reading the science and then reaching out and speaking to the actual scientists and vetting all of the scientific literature, because the industry will say, oh, those are just, those are cherry-picked studies. There's nothing to look at there. Well, he worked with the librarian at UNH, and they vetted the science, and these are top scientific journals. Maybe not your mainstream journals, but they are top scientific journals. So he did a lot of work out in Pittsfield, too, and in Lenox. So fingers crossed your town says, yeah, there's maybe something we can all learn here, and let's have Dr. Chamberlain speak to us. So I'm so glad you've connected with him.
It's important that people know that there are people out there who are willing to help and support and guide people who are trying to mobilize their communities. Kent speaks to communities all over. He actually just spoke to the Department of Health in a town about 30 minutes from where we live, because they're another threat in the community, they're trying to put up a new polling infrastructure, which they're eventually going to put wireless on top of that. So
what town is that, Elana?
Well, it's Heath and Charlemont.
Okay.
There's two towns. They're trying to work together on this big project, and there's a lot of people that are against it for various reasons. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to advocate for underground utility infrastructure, as they're doing in Vermont.
Yeah. And anytime we get a natural disaster, like when we had Hurricane Maria, all the above ground cell towers went down and nobody could communicate. So it's silly to put more infrastructure up, especially when our climate is going so unusual these days.
Yes,
So-
this was an important factor that was brought
Yeah.
up around the climate and a variety of other things. But the difference is with that situation, the Department of Health can hear and vote on health arguments. Cell towers are not designed to be in the zoning that they're trying to put it in. It requires a special use permit. And in
Excellent.
1996, the FCC lobbied for the government to not allow local ordinances to vote against wireless infrastructure based on the health and environmental issues, because they know full well that this research is out there and there are biological harms. And so while the Zoning Board of Appeals for this case in Greenfield can be made somewhat aware, it cannot be the bulk of our argument. We have other legal standing that we are working on in terms of property devaluation, in terms of aesthetic impact, which is a legal right. They have to deny this, and various other things like safety. If the
Right.
tower should fall, debris, fire, there's a fall zone that this tower is going to be 170 feet tall. It's going to rise well above the tree line, and it's right near homes. So,
Well, good on you. Are you at liberty to say which attorney you guys have engaged?
Yeah, we're working with Andrew Campanelli, who's based
Excellent.
in New York.
Yeah, so for folks who don't know Andrew Campanelli's work, he used to work for the telecom industry until he figured out that they were doing things that are not good for our planet or our people. He switched teams, and he knows their playbook. So it's critically important to get engaged before a cell tower goes up. It can be almost impossible to do anything to get that taken down. So you guys are spot on. And I understand that you have established a GoFundMe to help pay for these legal and other costs. Can you tell us how people can find you? We've got about 1 minute left today.
Oh, it's people can certainly email me, but it's GoFundMe. I can't remember the name of it, but it's I can send it to you.
And I think our producer will be able to put it up at the end notes on our
Okay.
show today.
Yes, it's like Stop Newton Street Cell Tower, because that's where it's intended to be placed.
Okay, yeah, and
But
this
we're
is
trying
how
to-
we get it done, is people get together, they learn the facts. The medical costs that you are very likely to incur from being near a cell tower are going to be astronomical. Nobody wants to have to open their pocketbook to have to pay for any of this stuff, but there's no cavalry coming. So if we don't protect our own communities, then chances are you may have to leave your home like they did in Pittsfield. One gentleman who didn't leave passed away, and when they opened him up, his body was just riddled with cancers. So this is not something to take lightly. Elana, I want to give a big shout out to you and everybody in Greenfield. I know Jonathan Marin of Hilltown Health has worked on this issue for many years, so you have excellent resources there. And we'll be cheering you on from the sidelines. Let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you along the way.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a tech safe day. Bye-bye.